Hi to the audience. Thank you once again for joining us for episode 3 of Power to Women, brought to you by Impact Africa Network. This is where we host global female business leaders, amazing women who are doing amazing things in different parts of the world, but more specifically in Silicon Valley, where they share their story with the intent of inspiring a new generation of female leaders, just like ourselves. And I'd like to remind you who we are. This is Impact Africa Network, a nonprofit startup studio in Nairobi, on a mission to ensure that young talent in Africa participate in the digital transformation of Africa. What we do is that we provide 12-month innovation fellowships to recent college graduates, where they work on well-vetted ideas which have a potential of solving market problems under the guidance of a leadership team. So today, as usual, I'm going to be joined by my colleague, Joy Ndinda. Joy.
Hi, everybody.
Well, we'll allow to introduce
Hi,
herself.
everybody. How are you doing tonight? My name is Joy.
Yeah, she introduces herself, and she's going to introduce to us one of the people I'm really excited to talk to today, guest for today. Joy, you can go ahead.
Good evening, good morning, depending on where you're watching us from. My name is Joy. I am really happy to be here today. Our guest for today is a lady by the name Kathryn Finney. I bet you've probably heard her name before or read it somewhere. You know, this is a lady who has had over 1,000 media features. So if you've not read about her, you really need to examine where you get your news from. So she's been in Good Morning America, Forbes, Essence, Cosmopolitan, you name it. Of course, she has made her mark as an entrepreneur, a visionary leader. She's been an advocate for women. And just during this COVID period, Kathryn has founded Donny Fund to encourage Black entrepreneurs, women entrepreneurs, especially women of color and Latino Americans. She's managed to raise over $150,000 to support 1,500 businesses led by Black women. So, Kathryn is doing a lot for tech. And welcome, Kathryn. I can't say enough. I would spend half an hour trying to introduce you. Welcome, and thank you for joining us today.
Hi. You're on.
It's great to be here with you all.
Yeah.
I know.
Maybe you want to speak for yourself and introduce yourself. Joy has done a fantastic job.
Yes. Well, it's hard to follow that, Joy. I'm a builder. I'm a person who likes to build things. I've always liked to build stuff. I grew up in the middle, almost exact middle of the country in the U.S. I was born in a state called Wisconsin. Grew up in a state called Minnesota, which is very, very cold right now. And started with entrepreneurship really early. I had a bracelet business in the 4th grade that was very lucrative. Then I had a babysitting company. And then I took that and I went to school on the East Coast and completely stopped being an entrepreneur. I actually went to school to become an epidemiologist and had lived a number of times in various parts of the continent of Africa. So I lived in Ghana twice, lived in South Africa, in Durban, and so have a real close attachment to the continent. I came back to the States and started a early sort of website lifestyle company called The Budget Fashionista. In fact, I'm like one of the early influencers. So, I've been doing selfies for like almost 20 years now. And that grew and it scaled and I sold it. And I went to go work for another woman-led organization called BlogHerd, which also was sold. So we can talk a lot about exits, particularly in the context of Silicon Valley, and how selling your company can really be a boost to get to the next level. And how do you do that, particularly in a tech context? And so I took that experience and the funds made from those 2 exits and started an organization called Digital Undivided. We started with a conference just to gather all Black women who were building startups. This was in 2012. There was not very many of us. But our very first conference, we had almost 150 people and a number of big name investors like Andreessen Horowitz and other people come. And we just scaled from there. And then we transitioned from that into a accelerator incubator program that's now in 2 locations, New York and in Atlanta, and scaled the organization to close to 30 employees, multi-million-dollar budget. And I recently left in June to start my next adventure. And so it's been an amazing life journey. I think right now it's been interesting how everything is sort of intersecting in my life, from the epidemiology, the entrepreneurship, and the tech is like all coming together all at the exact same time. So that's been pretty cool.
All right, I think my colleague is having connection problems. Seems to be a delay on her end, but it seems like you've already started us off well. That was going to be our first question. Like, tell us about your career journey, trajectory, and you've covered a lot of that, which I've also really read from your Medium post, with all the posts most of the posts that you've written, and also watched videos. But I'm interested to know, I know you studied something different. What did you want to be when you grew up? Did you always know you were going to be an entrepreneur?
That's such a hard question, right? Because what we start off thinking that we're going to do, and then what we end up doing many years later are not the same thing. And I think as women, and particularly as Black women, allowing ourselves to grow and change is very important. Allowing ourselves to fully develop and not have to be a certain thing, or not have to know what we're going to do at 13 for the rest of our life is really important. So originally I wanted to be a doctor. Then I wanted to be an economist. This is all growing up. I went to college thinking I was going to be a politician. I was going to be the first Black female president, that at the time, the first Black president. And then I did an internship in our government and was like, I don't think this is for me. And I had a fellowship in Ghana. And while I was in Ghana, I became sick with malaria. I had malaria, I had typhoid, I just got a lot of stuff, mostly because I was doing things I shouldn't have been doing. And so, but that sickness with malaria, which really knocked me out quite significantly, had a big impact on me. And the fact that I had the best healthcare because I was American and because I had access to capital that others did not have. My friends in Ghana, when they would get sick with malaria, they didn't have access to the same things that I had. And that really had an impact on me because that didn't make any sense. And so from there, I went into public health. I went to Yale and got a degree in public health, and then came back to Ghana and also worked in South Africa, really around sort of STIs, which are sexually transmitted illnesses, and women. And it was while working abroad and doing this work, I also had a parent who was sick and had to come back to the States, and met my husband. And you know what kind of happens when you fall in love, you kind of get sidetracked a little bit. And I was in America running this organization at like 23 years old, like had 3 locations, massive budget, and I'm the CEO. And I'm like, what am I doing? And started a blog. This was in 2002. And I started this blog because I was board. And at the time, there was none of the technology that we have now. Now we can do what you see is what you get, meaning you don't have to know how to code in order to have things show up. However, in 2002, you had to know how to code. So I had to learn how to build SQL databases and had to learn, HTML and a little bit of JavaScript and even Flash. For those of you who've been around forever, remember Flash. Had to learn all these things in order for the things I bought on sale to show up on my blog. And the blog became a really big thing. It turned out to be one of the first blogs that a lot of people actually read, particularly women. And then the blog led to a book, and it led to lots of TV. If you're ever super bored one day, you can Google and go down the rabbit hole of Kathryn and see some of my old TV segments. And from there, really just grew it into a startup. It was while building this startup that I entered into an early incubator program. It was one of the first sort of programs that prepared you to go out into the world of the startup. And it was while at this program that I was met with quite a bit of tension because of being Black and being a woman. And it was really hard for me because I'm a lifelong overachiever. I graduated my top of my class from Rutgers and from Yale. These are major institutions. And to have someone think that I couldn't do things, that I couldn't keep up just because I was a woman, just because of my race, was very, very difficult for me. And I never really experienced it quite that directly as I had in this incubator program. But fortunately for me, I had a company that I had built, and it was becoming even more successful. And so I sold that. And one of the things I think for people of color is we don't understand the impact of selling, right? A lot of times we build companies because we want it to be a legacy. We want to pass it on to our kids. We want to do these sort of things. But in the tech context, really what you want to do is you want to build, you want to scale it, and then exit. You want to get it to a point where you can either sell it to someone else, maybe do an initial public offering, right? On a stock market or a stock exchange, or somewhere where you can sort of exit so that you can recoup all the time and all the money and all the effort and all the heartache that you poured into this company. And that's what I was able to do. And then I went to go work for another woman-led organization that was much bigger, had a significant amount of venture investment. And then that sold as well. So it's part of two exits, which is really, really interesting and a unique position to be in, particularly as a Black woman. One of the few that have been involved in a couple of exits and seen how they work and how they also kind of don't work.
I mean, congratulations, really congratulations. I feel like I'm listening to you for the second time because I've spent a lot of this week listening to your talk, and the story is the same. And you might have touched on this a bit, but just to put it out there even for our audience to understand, for our audience, maybe you can explain what was the aha moment in your life where you chose that you're going to put your focus, your time, your energy in supporting Black female entrepreneurs and women of color. What was that point in your life?
That's a really good question because it's like multiple aha moments. I grew up being reared by Black women, and particularly my grandmother, who's an entrepreneur, was very important in my life. She had a real big influence in my life. And so supporting Black women and Black people was just something I grew up with. My parents did that. My father, who was a brewery worker, who worked incredibly hard, who's probably the smartest person I ever met, who had this incredible natural aptitude for logic and technology, and who worked his way from a brewery worker to an engineer at Microsoft to an executive at EMC, which is one of the early data storage companies. One of the things he was always involved, my parents were always involved in the community and figuring out how to get each other the hookups, as we say here in the US. So that's been a part of who I am. I was taught that. A couple of aha moments for me, I think, in terms of Digital Divided, like one of the moments where I realized, oh my gosh, like what I'm doing has this enormous impact. One was when Project Diane was first released. Project Diane is a data initiative we started in 2016. I named it after Diane Nash, who's a really well-known civil rights leader here in the US, and did it basically with myself and like 10 data collectors and an intern, and that was Project Diane, and really did it because we needed the data to justify and quantify the problem. And from there, it just totally blew up in 2016, and it took on a mind of its own, and it's had a massive impact on the venture space, not just in the US, but just in general. And so seeing that sort of scale was big. Going to the White House And being a White House champion of change and meeting, all of our sort of leaders and getting this and being at the White House and talking about my work and getting honored by the White House, that was a bit of an out-of-body experience, especially because I got to bring my family. And, you get a lot of brownie points with your mom. You can bring your mom to the White House with you. I think the other aha moment was recently, where I'm building something new that is really simple idea, but like really big at the same time, which is something I like to do. I often find the simplest things are the hardest things to do. And I had an aha moment about 2 days ago, in which it was clear to me like what I needed to do. And what happens to me in these moments is it's a little voice. You can call it God, you can call it the universe, you can call it your inner spirit, whatever you want to call it, but it's this other entity that says to me, Kathryn, you have to do it. And I know you don't know how you're going to do it. I know that the path is not clear, but you have to do it, and I will help you find a way. And every time in my life when I've listened to that, you can call it an aha, you can call it God, universe, whatever. Whenever I've listened to that, it has never stirred me wrong. And so, yeah, it's been multiple aha moments, not just one.
Great. Amazing journey. And before we continue, I'd like to remind our audience to engage with us on our socials, Twitter, Facebook, #IsPowerToWomen. This is one of most interesting journeys with Kathryn Finney. Tell us about Dooney. You started Dooney in the middle of a pandemic. Do you say Dooney or Dooney? Middle of the pandemic, you started a fund where everyone is trying to preserve money. Yeah. And you were able to raise a fund, and you have been able to support 1,500 entrepreneurs, Black entrepreneurs. Tell us about it.
Oh gosh, so the Dooney Fund is named after my grandmother, the entrepreneur who really had a massive impact on me. Her first name is Kathryn. Her real name is Kathryn Hill. But everyone in my family called her Dooney, including my friends, including, people who didn't know her. And in fact, I didn't know her real name until I was probably 13. I just would write letters to my grandparents and put Dooney and Papa J, I didn't actually know, oh my goodness, this is who I'm named after, right? So it started because when I was at Digital Divided, we gave out small grants, about $1,000, which are not too small, to organizations and companies that had gone through our program. Because we knew at the beginning of the pandemic that it was going to be a challenge. Anything that happens in the world, it happens to us as women, and as Black women even more so, right? So we knew that whatever was happening, whatever economic downturn, whatever economic challenge, it was going to really happen to us. And so we gave these small sort of grants to really support our companies and organizations as they were going through this period. And I saw how impactful it was. We kept it what we call frictionless, meaning we didn't ask a bunch of questions. We knew people were kind of distraught. Here in the US, things kind of just shut down. Things never just shut down in the US. So it was like a territory that no one had ever been in. And so we didn't want to add to people. We didn't want people to have to jump through hoops, knowing that everyone was really at this point where we were all just trying to figure out what was going on. So seeing that, I also happen to have had a vacation schedule. And we often joke in my family that it was the vacation that was never, ever, ever going to happen. It was a cruise at the beginning of April, leaving from the West Coast of the US, where COVID was at its worst. So I had this pot of money. My husband's company, Microsoft, had also increased its matching, meaning for whatever amount an employee would donate, the company would match to that organization. And so I wanted to do something. I couldn't go anywhere. I couldn't do anything. I was feeling like most people, quite helpless in March and April. And usually when I feel helpless, that is when I know that I'm actually at my most powerful. And so I did it. And I wrote a big check. It got matched by Microsoft, and we started the Dooney Fund. We purposely made it frictionless, again, because we knew that people were in trouble. And the worst thing you could do when someone's trying to figure out how they're going to eat and how they're going to pay their rent is ask them 50 irrelevant questions to get a small amount of money. We chose a micro investment, a small amount, because we wanted to make sure that A, we could do it quickly, B, that we could do it safely and legally, and C, that it would be a catalyst. Our goal was to show Black women entrepreneurs that we saw them, especially as a well-known Black woman entrepreneur myself. And so we started off with really only wanting to give, I think we were thinking that we were going to be able to give 100. That's how many that I was able to personally fund. And then we had partners who were asking, us that did if we needed additional help, because a lot of people, again, were really struggling during this time. Fortunately, I'm really good at managing budgets. Like, I can manage the hell out of a spreadsheet. Like, I'm very, very good at managing budgets. And so Digital Divide as an organization was actually in quite an excellent position. And so I asked those partners, instead of us taking the money, can we give it to other people? Can we give it? We have this thing called the Dooney Fund that we're doing. Can we take this funds and then give it to other Black women entrepreneurs who maybe aren't as fortunate as we are? And they said yes. And so we got additional funding, and we ended up giving, I think it's over 1,700 now, micro investments that we were able to do within a 6-week time period. People would submit an application. We only asked like very few questions. One, your name. Do you self-identify as a Black woman? So we didn't go and check. We didn't even care. Do you have an active business with a web presence? And what we meant by that was, we know that a lot of Black women entrepreneurs do not actually have websites, like traditional .com, .co websites, but many had Instagram businesses. Many had Yelp pages. Some were using Facebook, to manage as their sort of primary web presence, internet presence. And so we wanted to make sure that we didn't create barriers based upon other people's definitions of what is a tech company. And so it was incredibly powerful. It continues to be one of the best things that I've ever done in my entire life. And it's one of the things that I am most proud of, not only because of the people we were able to help and inspire. I can't even still believe like 1,600. That's just such a large number, but also that I was able to honor someone who meant and means so much to me, my grandmother, by doing something for someone else. And it's been amazing. And I'm always meeting women who receive funding from the Dooney Fund, and they're all doing incredible things, and all are really pushing forward with their businesses.
Wow, thank you. First of all, thank you so much, Kathryn, for just believing in, African women and giving them that chance and empowering them to just explore their ideas. And I was looking at some of those business ideas, just scrolling through them, and most of them are running really impressive businesses. So thank you so much for entrusting yourself with that responsibility. So as you may know, at Impact Africa Network, we're a startup studio where we develop startups. So we have a thesis that women are much better at leading and nurturing these startups as they begin to grow into profit-making organizations. So first of all, from your background, I would like to know what is your opinion on this?
I don't know if I would say we're much better. I think we're much more global in our leadership. And what I mean by that is, I think the nature of being a woman, if you're a mother, even if you're not a mother, many of us fall into caretaking roles for family members. You have to think, you have to have 360-degree thinking, right? You can't just think what's on your left and your right. You have to think what's in front of you and back of you, on the side of you, kind of off in the corner. And that makes us, I think, a more well-rounded leader. So I wouldn't say necessarily better, but a more well-rounded leader, because I literally am thinking of 100 people all at the same time. I'm thinking of my employees. I'm thinking of my spouse. I'm thinking of my family members. I'm thinking of my son. I'm thinking of myself. I'm thinking of the people who work and help me, in my household. Like, I'm thinking of a lot of different people at once and managing all of that. And most of us are really have created systems that have helped us manage that. And so I think that makes women definitely more global, more well-rounded leaders. I think we have an ability to have empathy, which can be sometimes hard for men. And not that I think men are empathetic people. I think the challenge is they're taught not to tap into that empathy. And so it can be really hard for them to be able to relate and to be able to understand. Like, if I've had staff members who are moms and look, both my kids are sick today, and I can't get it. I can't concentrate, right? Because I got to deal with that. And as a mother, I could say, you know what? You go deal with that. Let's touch base later. Or at the beginning of the pandemic here in the US, when everyone was scrambling to figure out what we were going to do with our kids. Because they shut down schools, they shut down everything. And so we're like, okay, I'm supposed to work and then also teach and tutor my, 5-year-old. And we had a lot of staff who were like, I just cannot work during the day. Like, I'm not able to focus and concentrate because I have 3 kids and they're all home at once, and we're all trying to figure out the internet, and we all are trying to figure out who gets to use what computer when. And so one of the things that we did, because again, being a woman-led organization, was like, you know what? We can have our meetings at 8 p.m. after they're in bed. 8 or 9 p.m. if that works best, so that you don't have to worry during the day. And having that sort of flexibility, I think, is what women can do, because we can understand, I think, a little bit differently than men.
Well, that's impressive. I like that you are able to be empathetic with them. Having worked with so many women in both the organizations you worked for and your own organization, I'm just curious, what are the most mistakes you've seen, women make that, you could advise the ones who are watching in our audience today so that they can avoid such mistakes?
Oh, that's a really good question. I think there's a couple of things. And I say these things because these are things that I work on myself. One is, always assuming that people are coming from a place of good until they indicate otherwise. Meaning, assume good intentions. If someone's having a challenging day, if someone is challenging, don't assume that it's necessarily even about you. There might be something else going on there. So always assuming good intentions. And that's really hard to practice. But it's something that I've really started to practice a lot more, even now where we have all of these sort of challenges, is assuming good intentions, assuming that this person means well. And it's really interesting how that changes your relationships with people when you come from that standpoint. Another challenge I see with women is not being clear on what we want, assuming that people know what it is that you want and you haven't actually communicated it. And so, making sure we're always clear about what we want. Now, the other side of that is that it can be very scary for some people to have a woman who's very clear on what it is that she wants, mostly because many of us aren't. So people get very taken aback by that sometimes. And I'm someone who's very direct and very clear. And I was talking to another woman and said, I have to be that way. I am juggling a lot of different parts of my life, right? I'm a CEO, I'm a leader, a nonprofit boards, I'm a mom, I'm a wife, I'm a friend, I'm a daughter, I'm a sister, all these different roles that I'm juggling. I don't have time to be around the bush, because if I'm being around the bush, that means that one of these roles are going to suffer because I'm spending too much time on something that really doesn't need to have that much time given. And so being direct is my way to help time management, really. But that's not something that's necessarily treasured with women, right? To be direct, and so this is what we need. But I find that it really helps move things forward. And then working on a way to sort of do that without people being put off is always a challenge, like working on the delivery of that. And that's something that I've done a lot of work with. I think also sometimes for women, we can care a little bit too much about what other people think. And in some cases we have to, right? We are human beings. We're social beings. You don't want people not to like you, but sometimes we focus so much on that it really holds us back, and that we're not able to do what we need to get done because we're so worried that if I do this person's going to think this and this and that. And what I've learned is sometimes it doesn't even matter. Like the people who are the haters going to hate you anyway. Like it doesn't matter what you do. And so you might as well just do it. One of my favorite quotes is by RuPaul, who's kind of a famous artist. I don't know if he's famous on the continent, but he's really famous here. And one of his quotes is, "What other people think about you is none of your business." And it's taken me a while to sort of accept that, but it's true. Sometimes it has nothing to do with you as a person and what you've actually done. And so by putting that in context, by not focusing so much on what other people think, you don't want to create enemies, but also you don't want it to control your life in the direction that you go on. And that's very important, I think, for us women to become comfortable with.
Right. I think we need to build that confidence in ourselves. Our vision at Impact Africa Network is to launch 10 startups in the next 10 years out of our studio. The good news is we've already done the first one, which is Data Science and AI School, Jenga School, which was launched in June. It's woman-led. The managing director is a lady. I just want to get your opinion on what is required for such exponential growth, 10 startups in 10 years.
Well, I actually think you're going to exceed that. I think you are.
Awesome.
And so there's a couple of things I think that are really important. One, understanding the markets in which the businesses exist. And focusing on the markets that you know the best and that you have the most partnerships and access to. That's how you get sort of the early wins, like start with what you know. And so doing that will get you there much quicker. I mean, you could probably do 10 within 5 years, right? Another thing that we have seen and I've seen is making sure that you really understand funding and finance, like who's going to fund the work and making sure they're committed for the long term. And not only the work that you do as, Impact Network, but also willing to fund the companies that come out too, and fund them at a level in which they can actually succeed. One of the things we've seen in the US is that women-led companies, particularly Black women-led companies, would often get just enough to kind of dip our toe in, but not enough to like jump completely in. So we would get, maybe $50,000, which can sound like a lot, but in the US is not a lot to really do anything. And so when our white male colleagues would get $1 million to do something, and we were expected to do just as much with this $50,000 as the white male who got $1 million. And so making sure that there is consistent funding that's at the level for your companies to succeed is going to be really super important. And being able to communicate that to partners and not, again, going back to asking for what it is that you need and being clear and direct and not shying away from it. Like, this is what we need. But then also, here's why we need it, right? Like, so we're not asking for it just out of the blue. Here's what it takes. Here's what similar companies got. And our companies need at least that much. And if you're a woman, you might need a little bit more because you're going to have all these challenges that have nothing to do with your capability, but everything to do with your gender. It's almost like a gender tax that you pay. So we're going to need to give them a little bit more to get over that gender tax. But communicating that clearly is going to be super important.
It's great that you bring up the funding question, the funding topic, because so I'll have to explain. So we are set up as a nonprofit because that's the only model we think and believe would allow us to do the in-depth work, because we work with young talent and we work in a market that requires a lot of work in terms of putting products out there that can be commercial. So it's a 12-month fellowship, and then they work on ideas, and after 12 months, they can start to attract a certain kind of funding. But within the 12 months, we are fundraising as a nonprofit. Now, already being in a different market is hard enough to access even grant money or philanthropic capital. But one of the most interesting things is, so far, what has happened is we have accessed funding from the typical, like you said, the white male, maybe because they have, I don't know, I can't even tell that what's the reason there. But I think I'm trying to get your opinion on women funding entrepreneurship. Like, women, you're doing it, you're supporting black women entrepreneurs, but what have you seen is happening or not happening, what needs to be done?
I think one of the challenges, here in the US, but if I think of my friends who are like in West Africa and Ghana, and I'm assuming that it's probably similar challenges, whether you're in East Africa, South Africa, North, like it doesn't matter, you probably have the same challenge, is that our money often isn't our own, meaning we're not just taking care of our husbands, ourselves, and our children. Like, our families are much larger, right? It's the cousin, it's what we call here the play cousin, the person who's not really related, but you grew up with them, so they're basically family. There's aunts, there's uncles, there's grandparents, there's a whole larger family. So when you are a Black person with money, you have a lot of people who are calling on that money. It's not just your immediate family, right? And so as a result, we don't have a lot of disposable income. We also starting out at a disadvantage too, because many of us are not getting assets from our parents or grandparents. We don't have the historical wealth. It wasn't like, our granddad owned, big farm and passed it down to us, and it got passed down, from generations. There's some cases like that, but for the most part, there isn't, right? A majority of us don't have that sort of historical wealth. Or if we do, it's maybe one generation to max. So we're not starting off wealthy. We're not starting off with assets. And so that creates a challenge, particularly for Black women, to be able to fund things. We don't have a lot of excess income. The reason why I'm able to do it was because I did sell my company and I created it and I owned it 100%. I didn't take PE or private equity. I didn't take venture on purpose. I also have a husband who's a software engineer at Microsoft. My husband is African American, but that's rare. There's not very many Black software engineers at major tech companies. So I was in a very rare, privileged position in which I could do those sort of things. But for us, we just have so much calls on our money. Like, our philanthropy really goes to our family. We just don't have a lot of excess income. Whereas white guys, they have historical wealth, right? So it's not just that they have money, everybody in their family has money, right? They're not the one who went to college that everyone put everything into and now has to support everyone else. They rarely have those sort of situations because historically they've had access. And so I think that's the challenge. And I always try to be not really critical on women funding because we have so many layers like that that don't allow us, even if we want to be able to fund at the same level as the white guys. And the same thing with Black men, like, just don't have the historical wealth that white people have. So then what do we do? Right? Because we have assets that are not determined as assets, particularly in the context of tech. We have networks that are incredibly strong that are not money networks. They're not necessarily networks that can write us a check, but they can definitely move our business forward. Many of us go to really big churches, right? Crowdfunding is very much in. I know of a number of founders who've raised, $50,000, $100,000 just because their pastor let them speak on a Sunday and they did crowdfunding and they got $25 here, $50 here, like relatively small amounts of money from people who go to their church. We have friends who can help spread the word of what we're doing. I know for me, I go out of my way to buy things from Black companies. I do. Like, I'm always looking at who's the CEO behind this, and if they're Black, I will go out of my way. In our grocery stores, we have people who do samples, like sampling of new foods and new products. And if that person is Black, I always buy it, even if it's something that I do not like. And the reason why I do that is, A, I know that a lot of people are not going to give that person a chance. And B, I know, because as a business person, how much they're able to sell will indicate whether or not they get put on the shelves. And so if their product is good, then it's even better, because then I can buy it continuously. But I think for us, we have these networks that we can tap into, that can get funding, that can help us spread the word of our company, all of those things. And those are very valuable. Sometimes those are more valuable than getting one check for $50K from some white guy.
I'm looking forward to the day we have more women being able to access and have deeper pockets, but that's actually really amazing. We are good at connecting and fundraising on a crowdfunding basis. It's our strength. So I want to take you back. I'm not sure if we have a question from the audience, but before I get that, I want to take you back to your personal journey. And just to find out, while you were going through your career trajectory, was there any specific mentors or maybe influences that you could accredit your success today and say they were part of your journey?
So for me, most of my success is really the result of the support of my family. One of the things I often say is partner well, marry well. Marry somebody or partner with somebody who can do stuff. And what I mean by that is not necessarily write your check or anything, but that they themselves can like help you get to where you need to be. The number of women I know who partner with people who cannot help them, who drag them down, who belittle them, who don't want to see them win, who are intimidated by their intellect and their smarts, is astounding. It's incredibly difficult to be successful if you have that in your life. So always partner with someone useful, someone who is pro you all the time. Even when they're giving you negative feedback and feedback that you need to hear, you know that they're giving it because you know the good intention is there. You know they're telling you that because they want you to win, right? But like, I cannot tell you as a woman how critical that is, to partner with somebody who is useful, who has their own skill set. Hopefully your skill sets complement each other, and that you're not spending your life trying to help them and they're not helping you. And so that's incredibly important. That has been a huge part of my success. When I started The Budget Fashionista, which was this blog at a time when nobody knew how to monetize the web, my husband was like, go do it. It sounds interesting. I got us. Like, I'll work extra in order to support us. When it became successful, I asked him, like, what is it that you want? Because it's successful. And he's like, well, I don't really want anything. So we went on this big trip to New Zealand and places like that. But like, having someone who's like, I got you. I see the vision. I believe in you. And so you go try this. And even if it doesn't work, I still believe in you. I know that you're going to land somewhere. And that's so important. I cannot stress that, of who you allow into your life. Creating a family, and family doesn't necessarily mean blood. It could be a group of friends. It could be whomever who support and love you, and who want to see you win. It's almost like your personal board of directors, if you think of it in that way, of people who are just, again, pro you and want to see you win, and who you can be vulnerable with. Because when you're building a company, you are going to have times where you are just going to want to sit down and cry, because it is just really, really hard. And so you need people there who love you, who are pro you, who want to see you win. And that's super important. Like, you cannot build a company without having that sort of team around you of people who love you and support. And it might be one person, maybe two people, you might have 50 people. It doesn't matter. You have to have that support, particularly as a Black woman. Like, it's just really, really difficult. And then there's like mentors who have been helpful. The founders of Blog Her have been incredibly supportive of me from the very beginning. And that's been really, really helpful, particularly in learning the structure of things. One of the things as a Black woman, even as a Black woman with my level and status and access to networks, people still don't share information with us. It's still some things that you don't know. Like, I was just learning, I'm going through the process about corporate boards. That is not something that anyone has ever really shared with Black women in mass, about corporate boards and how they work, and even that you get paid to be, like, all these different things, and how particularly white men have become very wealthy by serving on boards. Like, no one shares that with us. But luckily for me, having the mentors, they did. And we're like, look, here's an opportunity for growth for you that corporate boards can handle. But stuff like that, my mentors have been really helpful in understanding, because again, as a Black woman, we don't know. Like, no one tells us the things. Now, my job, though, as soon as they told me, I was like, now everybody's going to know, because I'm going to share it of how this works. So there's going to be a whole bunch of Black women who now know about this, but no one tells us these sort of things. And so my mentors have been very, very helpful. And I have mentors of all races and genders.
Great. It's interesting that you... Oh, sorry. I'm feeling a bit... It's interesting that you've really spoken about men in your life, particularly your husband, which is a concept that we started to hear about last week. A guest speaker from last week talked about the concept of good men. I'm personally grateful that I feel surrounded by such in my life, but one that I have to big up to in this particular context is the CEO, because this was actually his brainchild. This is his thesis, that the startups that grow out of the studio are going to be led by women. And so he's a champion for women as well. And we're glad that we're in this particular system. I don't know, Joy, if you have any questions from the audience that you'd like us to take.
Yes, we do. I think we'll have time for one or two. The first one, somebody wants to know what are the budgeting tips you can give them, especially when they're about to start startups.
Okay.
I think her name is Mercy.
I can talk about budgets all day, but I won't. One of the things that I have found has been really helpful, particularly as a woman, and particularly in the Zoom world that we're in, where we're all in these video things, is to develop a uniform. It actually saves you money. So like something like a set sort of uniform you wear every day. And this came actually from our president, our former president, we always consider him our President Obama, who in his closet, he only had like gray and blue suits. That's all he had in his closet. So that every day he didn't have to think about what to wear. And he did that because he didn't want to spend time worrying about what to wear. He had so many things going on. He just wanted to reach in his closet, put something on, and keep moving. But as a result of that, that meant that it also saved him money, because he wasn't buying a whole bunch of different stuff. He wasn't trying a whole bunch of different looks. So having a uniform, I cannot tell you how much time that has saved me. I cannot tell you how much money that has also saved. It's been really, really, really important. Another thing that I do is I have everything sort of automated in terms of savings, from like my retirement accounts to just like savings. And I use a lot of the saving apps that are out there. So getting as much automated as you can is really, really helpful, because it kind of takes the money out and you don't even know it's gone. Like you forget. So one of the apps I had set up to take out a certain amount of money each month to buy Amazon stock. And this was like 3 or 4 years ago. Amazon stock has increased 90% since that time. And I forgot I had it. I received a notification and it was like, you have all of this money because of Amazon stock. But I wasn't it was like a small amount of money each month that I was literally not paying attention to, but I had automated it. So now, fast forward, I'm benefiting from that. So as much as possible, automate your savings in particular. In terms of spending, really focus on needs versus wants. And what I mean by that is not, they'll say, don't drink that coffee because that's bad or whatever, but maybe that coffee is the one thing you look forward to each morning. So it is a need for you. So I'm not saying cut out stuff like that, but I think a lot of times we'll find ourselves like spending when we don't know why, and mindlessly spending, and we buy stuff we don't even like. It's like, why am I buying this? This is stupid. Like, I don't even like it, right? And so really practicing mindfulness and really thinking about what you're spending, but not giving up your joy. If that coffee brings you joy, if going to the movies brings you joy, don't cut it out. Like, do it. We need more joy in this world. And so those are just a couple of my budgeting tips.
I like that you said we do need more joy in this life, which is true. um, I think time is up. Time always moves so fast in these conversations. 50 minutes have come and gone. But before we end, I'd just like to tell our audience that they can always keep up with conversations with Kathryn and more other women in tech every Friday around this time. You can follow us on all our social media networks. It's Impact Africa Network on all our social media networks, and you'll be able to see who's coming next and what time they will be here. So, as a question, we like to ask every lady who comes on the show before we finish is, you've had your time. You've really done so much, especially for women of color. What is the challenge for the next generation of women leaders behind you, who are the fellows in our studio and us as well?
I think the next challenge is going to be making sure the existing structures that were developed by us old people are not used to restrict them, and for them to not be afraid to completely dismantle all those things. I think the one thing that COVID has taught us is that many of the things that we were told were truths, meaning you can't work from home, like all the stuff that was just told that you just are not able to do, are actually false, right? And so I think for the next generation, not allowing these structures that existed and was created by people that are not really relevant to the world we live in right now, not letting those dictate the future. And I think that's going to be the biggest challenge.
Awesome. I think we have a long way to go, especially in policy and such things. Um, Also, before we call it a day, I would like to mention that Impact Africa Network is a non-profit startup studio. Why we are set up as a non-profit, of course, as my colleague mentioned, is so that we are able to provide a safety net for these fellows so that they don't have to worry about rent, bus fare, food, such things, so that they can just concentrate on innovating the next big ideas. And so for us to be able to do that, of course, we require donations. So we urge you to donate from as low as $30 a month to as much as you have. It could be less, it could be more than $30, but every cent you give counts to changing the African narrative and giving women this leadership opportunities so that we can be the next leaders, we can be the next change, because we got it, we can do it. And so thank you everyone, and more specifically thank you to our audience. You guys have been so active. It's just because I can't keep reading all your messages, but I promise we will address all your questions. Just follow us on our social media networks. So it's been such a wonderful conversation, Kathryn, and we hope maybe we can have you on another session to be able to address all the audience
Thank
questions.
you.
Otherwise, yes, from us
Wow.
it's thank you and good day or good night, depending on where you're watching us from. Good night.
All right. Bye.
being in a tech ecosystem, we don't have a lot of women. For me to be here is proof that women can do it, women can be leaders, and I hope to inspire other women, especially young African women, to be bold and courageous, follow their passions, and when they're offered that seat at the table, to take it and take the front seat at changing the African narrative.
Since I joined Impact Africa Network, my thinking has really been expanded. I now for sure believe that if I put my mind and time into something, I can bring life-changing ideas into fruition.
The culture at IAN encourages continual learning. This makes someone to source for outlets for learning, opportunities for growth in order to continually ensure that they do the best at their job. Also working with Mark, who has this great vision for changing the African narrative. He wants to take us on that journey with him, pushes you to the limit, pushes you to want to be better.
My thinking has changed from looking for problems to being a solution provider. That way, I will stop worrying and actually do something.
I really enjoy being a leader and at the same time being a student. At Impact Africa Network, there's a lot of continuous learning and development. So it gives you this hunger for knowledge. It pushes you to be the best possible version of yourself because you cannot change the African narrative being anything less.
At Impact Africa Network, we bet on the women. We believe women are much more effective at leading and nurturing complex people-centric systems, and startups are the quintessential people-centric systems of our day.
As the Women of Impact Africa Network, we will be hosting a live cast series with global female leaders and change makers, having conversations with the intent of inspiring a new generation of female leaders just like ourselves. If you or someone you know should be part of this conversation, we would love to host you. Talk to us.
You can also be a change maker by helping us create more leadership opportunities for women by donating today. IAN is a registered U.S. nonprofit charitable entity under Section 501c3.